Good afternoon, everyone. This is Kim Schmidt, Executive Editor of Farm Equipment Magazine. Welcome to our latest webinar in conjunction with the Western Equipment Dealers Association. Today's presenters are John Schmeiser, CEO of WEDA, and Michael Piercy, who heads up WEDA's Dealer Institute. They'll be sharing the results and key findings of WEDA's second survey on employee development. This year's survey goes a little deeper into the issues addressing the key factors and challenges dealers face in maintaining and attracting quality individuals that are needed for their dealerships to grow and prosper. Before they get started with the presentation, just a few housekeeping items. First, a reminder, we are recording today's session, so if you want to go back and watch it again later or share it with someone else at the dealership, a recording will be available for you. And then on your screen, there's a control panel with the Q&A icon. You can submit questions here at any time, and then we'll try to answer as many of those as possible following the presentation. All right, we are ready to get started. Thank you again for joining us, and you can take it away, Michael.
Thank you, Kim. As always, we appreciate the opportunity to partner with Farm Equipment Magazine and are especially excited to offer some insight on the topic of workforce development. And if you'll indulge me just for a couple of minutes before I turn it to John, I want to give just a little background on how we got to where we are. Now, we know that workforce development is not a new topic, but it becomes more and more relevant every year, and this year's survey confirms it. Based on some of the results we're going to share today, you will find it's not only relevant, but is now a major, well, not just a major, but a top concern for many dealers. As we look,
I think we've lost Michael. So with that, Kim, maybe I'll just proceed and get into the results of the survey, and then towards the end, we'll circle back with Michael's comments. Does that work?
Yep, that sounds good.
Okay, so and just to echo some of Michael's comments, a thank you to our dealers who have participated in our second annual survey. And putting this together at last year, we were pleased with the responses as well as the results that came in, and how our dealers were very willing and open to share some of the concerns that they had in workforce development. And one of the things that came out of last year's process was a request that we do this on an annual basis. So we did launch the survey again in November, and one of the differences this year, we opened it up to the distribution list of Farm Equipment Magazine. So Kim, a thank you to you and your colleagues at Farm Equipment for joining with us on the survey. And perhaps, what's really interesting is there are some differences between last year and this year's survey, but the general themes are there. The same concerns are there from last year, and certainly the same challenges are there from last year. And what we found with the 62 responses that we received, representing 437 locations, we saw a little bit of a shift this year. We had a higher weighting towards larger multi-store operations in the first survey. This survey this year, it was we had a lot more participation coming from smaller operations in the 4 stores and under. We'll get into that in a second. And one thing that we also tracked this time was how many dealership employees do the participants in the survey actually represent or employ. And so just under 11,000 employees of the 437 locations are represented in the survey. Some changes. Our average number of locations is 7. That was 9 last year. The middle number was 8 last year. It's down to 4 this year. The highest frequency of locations in the survey was 1, and that's compared to 4 last year. And the range was 28, which means we had one 29-store operation. This is the breakout by line. We saw an increase in the New Holland and the Kubota and AGCO numbers, as well as the other numbers, and a decrease in the John Deere and the Case IH numbers compared to last year. However, looking at this pie chart, I see a lot of balance, a lot of equal responses, if you will, from the Case IH, Kubota, and New Holland brands. AGCO is up, like I mentioned earlier, John Deere down a little bit, but we certainly have more consistency or more equal responses in the brands this year compared to last year's survey. And then regarding participants by locations, like I mentioned earlier, we saw a 5% increase in the locations of 1 to 4 locations. So that's up to 47%. So just under half of the survey this year, 4 stores or less. And 5 to 9 locations also saw about a 5% increase over the previous year's survey. The biggest reduction was in the 15 plus locations compared to last year's survey. So a further breakout on the participants by locations. We see the 1 to 4, 29 responses, which accounted for 66 locations. And then at the other end of the screen, 15 plus locations. We had 11 responses there, accounting for 184 locations in total, and an average of the employees for each of those four groups of how many employees were or how many individuals were employed by each ownership group that participated in the survey in those categories. We also broke it out by country. More for curiosity than anything. 60% of the respondents came from the United States, 40% from Canada. I can't give you a comparison to this last year. It's just something that's new for this year, and we didn't track last year. So the first question that we asked both last year and this year was bench strength, and very significant results. In a year-to-year comparison, we've got 27% of our dealers stating that they do have the bench strength within their dealership. And I do a comparison to last year. Last year, that number was 40%. So there is a significant drop of over 12% year to year from dealers responding to the survey that feel that they have the bench strength to move their people into senior and mid-level management roles. So the no number has gone up, and where that 12% went to a combination of no, we do not have that bench strength, or they're not sure. But very clearly, we've got over 50%, over half of our dealers stating that they do not have the bench strength to move people up into more significant roles within the dealership.
Hey, John,
immediate need. Yes, Michael.
I was just going to share, some of the responses. I apologize. I don't know what's going on with my technology here, but I think that bench strength question is so revealing. And if you don't mind, I'd just share a couple of comments that we had.
Yes, please.
And the first one is really telling. It says the challenges associated with managing a team and staff through the COVID era has been crushing to leaders. Responsible managers are trying to abide by local, state, and federal mandates while trying to manage staff, many of whom are in rural areas. They would just rather quit than comply. I think that's very telling about the condition that some of our dealers are facing. And then a couple of others, we have the talent, but most are unwilling to move, which is what we need them to do to advance. And then the last one that I would point out is our issue is having sufficient staffing, period. For advancing roles is difficult when simply having enough people in the building is the larger issue. And I think that's been a trend, John, that we've seen, especially over the last couple of years.
Perfect. Thanks, Michael. We'll move on, and glad to have you back. We'll move on to immediate needs. And we asked this question last year as well, too. And we saw a fair bit of consistency, with the exception in a couple of areas. No surprise that service manager, the number one immediate need, that's the same as last year. But the noticeable jump that we saw over the previous year was in store manager or general manager. We saw that immediate need increase by 6%. And we also saw the need for parts manager increase by 5% over the previous year's survey. And everything else was fairly consistent to last year. And Michael, maybe before I turn it over to you for the comments, one thing I should share, that as the survey results were coming in, we were tracking them, and we noticed that once we had about 40 survey results in, from our participants, the numbers didn't really change very much. So maybe a tenth of a point here, there, and everything on every result that came in afterward, but it was fairly consistent, right from start to finish. And like I said, we didn't see much change at all once we had those first 40 responses in. So Michael, any comments on immediate needs that we feel we should share? and perhaps we've lost him again. Okay, so I'll move on. And the next question that we asked was long-term needs. And here again, we saw some significant changes. Service manager was, again, the long-term need identified last year, and the top long-term need in terms of was 63% and 60% in this year's survey. But perhaps the most significant change year over year in the survey was a jump in parts manager, and that jumped a full 25% from the previous year's survey. Consistent in what we're hearing as well too in some of the training that we're doing. We are doing a fair bit of parts counter training with some of our dealer groups, and I think we've all acknowledged the challenge in finding service managers and that special skill set that's needed to be a successful service manager. But we're seeing an added emphasis on aftermarket business and wanting to see our parts department growing. And there's skills that are specific to a parts manager that are needed to help individuals succeed. I think there's training out there as well too. But their respondents were pretty clear that this is becoming a bigger and increasing challenge in filling that role, and certainly is on their radar as a long-term need. Perhaps this also has something to do with attrition, and we've got a question on that we'll share a little bit later. So we'll move on to skill development, consistent with last year, but we restructured the question and put in a number of different categories from strongly disagree to strongly agree. No surprise that leadership training, once again, a pretty solid 70% plus either agree or strongly agree, and we take somewhat agree, and then we're up to 90% of the need of leadership training that's desired for the key people. Consistent with last year, operational best practices was a strong and solid number 2, and understanding financials, again, very strong results from somewhat agree. Pretty much 80% of the respondents somewhat agree to strongly agree that understanding financials is also a key issue. So last year we narrowed it down to 3, and this year we just decided to expand the survey to ask questions regarding specific department and then specific skills. So first of all, we'll get into the departments, and pretty much right across the board, very consistently from 75% up to 80%, it's somewhat agree to strongly agree that every department, every key department of the dealership, training is needed and desired. Management, financial, technical competencies, parts department, service department, and whole goods department. So that's the department. And now we drill down a little bit deeper to ask about a number of key metrics. And there's 15 in total. And we'll go through these next 3 slides that outline these 15, and then we'll kind of give you a recap, because I understand these slides are a little bit busy. I guess if anything I could point your attention to is look on the right-hand side of the scale, where we've got the purple and I guess a fuchsia color that represents strongly agree, and then the orange color that's representing somewhat agree. So you do see some changes on this slide, like change of ethical versus corporate vision or mission. And so this is slide number 1, corporate vision, mission, and interpersonal skills, empowering, ethical concerns, collaborative teamwork. This is slide number 2, that addresses relationships, strategic thinking, humility, persistence and grit, and being an inspirational leader. And some of these things we'll admit, it's how do you teach this? Some of this is attitude, some of this is behavior, but still I think necessary skills that CEOs are looking for in their management team to help them take their dealership to the next level. So the final 5: leading change, workforce development, customer service, results focused, and accountability. So let's look at the key takeaways of these 15 metrics that we asked CEOs to provide their opinions on skill development or that's needed with their managers. Very surprising to us, or perhaps we shouldn't be surprised. Workforce development was the number 1 item. And what that tells us is CEOs, owners are looking for skills and training on helping their key managers or the people that are doing the hiring, helping them in developing hiring skills, learn how to hire, learn how to recruit. This is our topic, it's workforce development, and it just goes right to the top and very distinctively that dealers need help in this area and they need training in this area. And I think about how they go about doing their hiring and their training historically, I think speaks to why this has become the number one issue for them. And we'll get into that in a few slides. So following workforce development, strategic thinking, leading change, interpersonal skills, empowering, accountability, and inspirational, rounded up the top agree or strongly disagree categories of those 15. Interestingly enough, on disagree or strongly disagree that these skills and training is needed in this area for employees are ethical behavior, humility, persistence and grit, relationships, accountability, collaborative teamwork, and customer service. Interesting that accountability is on both strongly agree and strongly disagree. So no middle ground at all on that. Respondents were strong opinions one way or the other about how necessary this was. Most interesting was seeing customer service as low as it was. And I think, an observation, I think every dealer believes that they know customer service and they do well with customer service. And perhaps an interesting exercise would be to match up the numbers that are coming from dealers as they're rating themselves on customer service with doing a similar survey with their customers and seeing what their thoughts on the dealer's specific customer service ability is. So perhaps a project or a task for us down the road on skill development. Recruitment from manufacturers is an interesting question for us to ask. Do they still have a talent pool that's available, applicable, helpful to an equipment dealership? And as we all know, historically, this had been a good pool for dealership employees in the past, and our numbers are changing on this. Even from last year, yes had dropped to 3%, no had increased to 2%, and like last year, we received more comments in this area than any other comment section that we asked. Our dealers were very vocal about recruitment from manufacturers. Just to summarize some of the comments, that we did have, there's a rural versus urban issue. There's a pay issue coming from the manufacturers. The manufacturers themselves are struggling to find, key people in some of their positions. Manufacturers have also gone into some streamlining and downsizing, and some of those individuals who are working at a manufacturer have left the industry entirely and are not looking at a dealership as an option. And we also have seen in this some distinctive changes, distinctive differences between the brands themselves, where some brands have been more successful in recruiting from manufacturers than others. So we will move on. And developing people was the next question. And again, in comparison to last year on the question of are you doing enough, the yes number dropped 9% over last year, and no increased about 11%. So it's very clear that when you have 2/3 of your dealer network saying no, that we are not doing enough, that it is top of mind. It is top of mind to our dealers that they need to be doing more in this area, but sometimes narrowing down where the resources get put on doing more is a little bit problematic because of one thing that, and we'll get into that in a second, that's time. Everybody is just busy. We don't have the resources that we need, especially time. We don't have enough time in the day to do this. And everybody acknowledges that when you send staff away for training or staff to training, it's time that they're taking away from the business and taking care of the customer. Very consistent with last year, CEOs were asked if there's adequate training available, and almost identical to the results that we had last year. So the training is definitely out there in the eyes of our equipment dealers, but I think it's time. We also asked about training sources last year. What is the preferred source of training? Interesting to note that manufacturer sponsored training is pretty much the lowest of the three, outside of other. Internal training and grooming by existing employees by the highest. When you compare that to a new question that we asked this year, is where your training dollars going to? Very interesting result. So almost half, 44% of the training dollars are going to manufacturer sponsored training. If we go back to the previous slide, we've got dealers saying that that's not their preferred source of training. Okay, so there's a little bit of a disconnect there of where the dollars are going to versus what the dealer's preferred source of training. So you'll see that percentage of dollars that are going to independent training or consulting firms are internal, number 3 and 4 on the list that we've provided of where your training dollars are going to. So of that training dollars, we asked this question: how much are you spending on technical people or other? With people, we put management training or leadership, and that's less than 30%. 70% of the training is going towards technical, which we've defined as service schools or technician training. And so when you look back to those 15 different options that we gave dealers, as well as what's the number one thing? Leadership training, operational best practices. The training dollars are not going there at all. The training dollars are going to the technical side. And a new question that we also asked for this year was turnover. And you see how we've described voluntary, involuntary, and attrition. And this slide itself, very problematic for our industry. We'll remove involuntary, which, a layoff or termination. But the other two categories, 30% of attrition and voluntary leaving the industry is problematic for an industry that has workforce development challenges. To see that number as high as it is was surprising. In some of our communications that we have with high schools or colleges about training programs affecting our industry, we have historically used the number of 8% turnover. What our dealers are telling us in the survey is that number is considerably higher than 8%. But like I said, very problematic for our industry. We asked last year about effective recruitment approaches and networking, personal relationships, personal recruitment, again, top of the list. And that number is very consistent to last year. No surprise as well. We are in a relationship-based business, and relationships is how we have historically looked at training. In recruitment when we have open positions to fill within our dealerships. So that's no surprise. But the one thing that was a little bit of a surprise for us on this was the drop in recruitment firms, a full 7% over the past year of success or value that dealers see in using recruitment firms to fill open spots. I think that number speaks for itself. There are services out there, but dealers are obviously not having a lot of success with individuals that have been secured through recruitment firms. Otherwise, we imagine that number would be considerably higher. So here are some of our key takeaways, and following that, we'll get into some questions and some more comments. So no surprise, bench strength continues to be a challenge, and that's regardless of the line. It's fairly consistent when we look at this, what we've done internally so far in a line-by-line breakout. Bench strength is an issue. We just do not have the people in our dealerships right now that we need to be able to promote to the next level as the dealerships grow. Dealers are asking or sharing with us in the survey that their staff need to be trained in recruiting employees or workforce development. So that's something that we did not see last year, and perhaps we didn't see it because we never gave that as an option. We never asked it, but lo and behold, it was the top the top skill training that was required from dealers that participated in the survey. Service managers continue to be in high demand, both short and long term, and an argument can be made that it continues to be one of the hardest positions to fill in the dealership because of the special skill set that's needed. We saw an increasing demand for store and general managers compared to the 2020 survey, and no secret that as dealerships get larger and finding capable general managers or store managers to run these businesses, part of the ownership group, increasingly becoming a challenge, as well as for parts managers. So I noted before that 25% jump of the need to fill a parts manager. That too was a little bit surprising about how significant or how large that percentage increase was on the need to fill a parts manager position. Leadership training continues to be in high demand. Operational best practices is the second highest need. Interestingly enough, only 16% of our respondents said that OEM staff were a good source of talent for a dealership, and that number's dropped over the previous year, as well as this one. Only 16% of our survey respondents are saying that they're doing enough to develop their own people. So we have the survey respondents saying that there is not, over 50% are saying that there is enough training out there, but 16% stating that they're not doing enough to develop their own people. So to me, that tells us it's a time issue. So again, almost half the respondents saying that there were enough training services available. Some additional takeaways: very low preferences for manufacturer or manufacturer-sponsored training. However, it's where the majority of training dollars are spent, and that's where that technical aspect comes into play as well too. Technical training is the focus. We need our techs to be able to repair the newest models that come from the manufacturers, but there is a recognition that dealers need to spend elsewhere. And in a lot of cases too, because of dealer standards or points, dealers are putting their staff into those manufacturer sponsored training programs for those reasons. That's their motivation, checking off a box, as opposed to strategically looking at their dealership and what they need from a dealer perspective to move their dealership to the next level. I like to use the phrase that we're so busy working in the dealership that we don't take the time to work on the dealership, and training is a big part of that. The time continues to be the issue. It's just one thing we can't get more of, and our dealers are busy 365 days a year. They know that they need to invest in training, but how do they manage employees away from the customer, taking training or traveling? It's a balancing act to get that training when you mix in the customer expectation plus the time commitment. There continues to be a huge discrepancy between the major lines about the annual amount of training dollars that are spent. That's something that we see internally with our Dealer Institute as well too. We know that internal training or mentoring is most common, but once again, we had some feedback that sometimes when we do mentoring, we're also teaching bad habits, and that we need to do a better job on onboarding best practices right from the beginning when a new employee joins our dealership, especially one from outside the industry. Personal recruitment and networking, still the dominant approach to recruitment. That's speaks to our industry about the relationship-based industry that we do have. Dealers don't see value in search firms or headhunters. Legacy issues continue where we take our best service tech and we promote them to service manager, or we take a parts counter person and promote them to parts manager. It's something that we know that our dealers have no other choice what to do just because of the limited talent pool that is out there. And attrition issues are creating more challenges and perhaps bigger challenges than we thought. And I'll refer to one comment that really stuck out from a dealer who participated in the survey, and that was it was one or two key employees leaving would have been the end of their dealership. That's how precarious their situation is, and they know that they wouldn't be able to replace these people. We're assuming from the comment that these are are non-owners, don't have any shares in the dealership, but are staff, but are key staff, and the dealer wouldn't know what to do in terms of replacing them, and would he be able to keep his dealership functioning if some key people left? That really, I think that comment alone speaks to, some of the challenges that we have with workforce development and how precarious our situation is when it comes to our personnel. And lastly, you have is dealers do not approach recruiting or training in a strategic way. And I'll provide my opinion on that is partly because of time. We're plugging a hole. When the hole becomes open, we're not investing time to work on the business. We're too busy working in the business. And if we're working in the business, working on the business suffers strategically. You can't think of your business strategically if you're putting out fires all day or dealing with customer issues or manufacturer issues or staff issues, if that's what's dominating your day. So with that, we will make available copies of this survey to anyone who requests it. We'd be happy to distribute it. We're also working on a breakout by line. We will be able to provide that on request. And I'll be happy to share that with you. So Kim, I'll turn it back over to you for any questions that we may have.
All right, yeah. And first everyone, Michael Piercy apologizes for he had to just totally drop off because he was having some technology issues. So apologies for that. Our first question, and it's a little long, John, so bear with me as I read this all. How much impact on the number of smaller dealers was represented by increasing the participating respondents to include the farm equipment subscribers? The person asking says he believes it also impacted some of the other changes that you mentioned, but thought the survey is more representative of the industry because of the broader responses. So
yeah,
the question itself is how much of an impact on just the number of smaller dealers do you think that was? Yeah,
I think it had a significant impact on the results, and I also think it's I think speaks to the fact that it doesn't matter what size you are, small or large, you're having workforce development issues, and maybe if you're a smaller dealer, you're having some different challenges, or you're not making the investment that maybe a large dealer organization is making in training. But we sent the survey out through Farm Equipment and invited the industry to participate. And I think the fact that individuals from smaller locations were so accommodating to participate and provide their concerns or their thoughts, I think it may be a bigger challenge for them. We certainly see that when it comes down to the spend. According to our cost of doing business study, the average spend on training on an annual basis across North America is $30,000. And when you look at the requirements from our manufacturers just on product training or service schools, that's the $30,000 right there. We have a significant amount of our dealerships that are investing over $250,000 because on an annual basis in training, because they look at training as an investment. And I think that's one of the barriers that we still have here, in addition to time, is training is looked at as an expense, or training is looked at as a necessary evil because the manufacturers are requiring it, and we check off a box to meet dealer standards. So you lump all of those things together in a smaller operation that has less employees, but they're probably having the same per location challenges that a large group is, and so I think maybe that's why we're seeing parts manager jump up over the previous year as a long-term concern. But having said that, pretty much everything else in the immediate needs was consistent with last year when the survey was more heavily weighted towards large multi-store operations.
All right, and then have the manufacturers that were referenced in the survey, have they been able to see the results, particularly the current dealer training investment versus the need? And if yes, what was the reaction? Yeah,
so great question. So last year, we had a number of manufacturer representatives that participated in this webinar, and we had conversations with every manufacturer afterward who asked us for their line breakout, and we provided that to them. So they did see the results. I think philosophically, the manufacturers want to see dealers invest more in training. And I think that's why some manufacturers have gone down that road more aggressively than others about making training available to dealers, manufacturer-sponsored training. And that's great because it's raising the bar for everybody. But having said that, our survey is pretty clear that the manufacturer-sponsored training is perhaps not what the dealer is looking for. And I'll throw an opinion there as well too, that based on some comments I've heard from dealers, the manufacturer training may be designed for the manufacturer's interests, not the dealer's interests. And that's one thing that dealers are sourcing out, other forms of training for their dealership employees that meets the needs of management or the shareholders and the owners of the dealership.
All right. And then the next one was we being dealers need to get credit for training when we use training available through the association. Where does that stand now?
I agree 100% with that statement. And this is something that we are working on. We have various partnerships with manufacturers right now on some training. We are doing some training with some manufacturer of their field reps, talking about a dealership's operations to help, train the field reps and manufacturers. We have relationships with our organization, with every manufacturer, but it's frustrating that this isn't happening as quick as it should. Dealers see value in the training that's being offered by us at Dealer Institute and other vendors, providers out there. And we've seen changeovers at manufacturers as well in terms of people that are leading this from their end. And it has been frustrating, I think, for all of our dealers that we haven't been able to get this done quicker. But it doesn't mean that we're going to stop asking. And we're going to do our best to leverage the relationships and the training that we have with manufacturers right now to get to that very point where any training that you take will be qualified for dealer standards, dealer points.
Okay. And then kind of staying on the same theme with the manufacturers, do you think that the manufacturers are more focused on technical and product training, but then the dealers are asking for more business, financial, and operational training to develop their workforce?
Yeah, that's exactly what we're seeing. Yeah, the manufacturers have different interests in what training that they want to push out to the dealer network, where dealers, it's very clear, dealers are looking for, leadership. They're looking for operational best practices. They're looking for strategies to help them, in their profitability. So there are different needs, if you will, and what a dealer wants to accomplish versus what a manufacturer wants to accomplish. It's very, very clearly defined. 2 years in a row now, we've had those same results, that we're going to participate in the manufacturer training because either we're required to or we need to check off a box. But on the other hand, me as a dealer, this is what I need. This is what I need to take my dealership to the next level. Yeah, very, very clear lines between that and how that question was stated is that's what's happening within the industry.
All right. And then do you have any idea how many OEMs, are accepting training, like, WIDA's doing training, that the Bob Clements Group is doing, other organizations like that? And are there manufacturers who are fighting to allow that in? Is that something you would know?
So there is a perception within some manufacturers that their preference is to have the training delivered through their organization because it's meeting their needs. And to be complementary to some other manufacturers, no, they've come to us or they've come to other firms, and we would like to see training delivered. Expertise that's coming, from the field as opposed from the manufacturer. There has been an acknowledgement. There's been statements made to us by manufacturers that they want to see their dealers succeed, and perhaps an improvement in operations or strategies is needed. And perhaps it's best if that came from somebody besides the manufacturer. I think that's a sign of of a true partnership, but we still need to, kind of close the loop on that by having the dealer get credit from the manufacturer for training within the dealership that perhaps the manufacturer isn't forcing down on them. So, ourselves, our organization that I can speak to, we've had manufacturers come to us and ask us, to provide a solution, to put together an RFP that's providing a solution for their dealers on a certain question, whether it's the service department or parts department. And I assume that they're doing that with other vendors as well. And in the end, I think the most successful ones are the ones that are vetted through the manufacturer's dealer advisory board or the dealer's advisory committee, and getting that dealer input is very, very critical. And I'll compliment the manufacturers for that process of going to the DABs and saying, where can we help you? Where can you support you? Now tell us what you think we need, because we've seen some business come our way because of that process.
Okay. Shifting gears a little bit with, there was the survey showed that, the headhunters and those type of firms aren't as useful as maybe they had been in the past, or there's just a tendency to move away from them. When it comes to looking for employees, from outside of the industry, is there a area that you guys have seen, or another industry that, seems to be the best to recruit from, since there is, the farm equipment dealership universe is somewhat limited?
Yeah. So from our perspective, kind of like industries, and so that's anything to do with crop inputs, where there's a relationship with a customer. So kind of outside, but not too far outside our industry, because we are a relationship-based business. And if somebody understands that relationship with the customer, and they're in the seed or the chemical or the fertilizer industry, at least they understand, that component of it. If it's ag, on the construction side, same thing when it comes to perhaps the trucking industry. There's a dealer manufacturer relationship with the dealer contract. There's a customer component about it. Perhaps maybe not as similar as with ag, but certainly some crossover between that customer relationship that's so important in an equipment dealership. So that's, I think, where we have seen some of the biggest successes in that cross-industry recruitment. But my understanding, Kim, too, is those industries are also having incredible challenges in finding people. So it's like we've got a smaller and smaller pool of people out there that we could be bringing into our dealerships. And how do we fix that? Well, we fix that by exposing our industry in colleges and in high school, maybe a combination of foreign recruitment as well. So we've learned as an association, there is not one fix to our workforce development challenges. We have to do this from a shotgun approach of doing a whole bunch of things to raise the profile of our industry, and perhaps to even raise the profile of the significance of our industry on the day-to-day lives of people who live in North America, of how food gets on their plate and how their roads get built. And that's something that we as an industry have talked about considerably in our conversations with the Association of Equipment Manufacturers. This is always a discussion item of what do we do to make our industry more attractive to a kid coming out of high school that's looking for a career, because we have sophisticated equipment, we have exciting technology, we also have an exciting future as well. And we're not doing everything that we can to make our industry attractive to that next generation.
Okay, and then the next one is, do you think our industry is working with colleges and business and agribusiness schools enough to attract mid-level service, parts, and branch managers? Are we on the radar for those types of graduates?
In the conversations that we've had with colleges, absolutely. Yeah, they know who we are, and they want their programs filled as well. So we've got a common interest of filling their programs. Can we do more? Yes, absolutely. We can do more. Can we do more with more colleges? Yes, absolutely. We can do that. So this is something where the work is never done when it comes to working with colleges. There's always more to do, and there will always be more to do as long as we have these workforce development challenges.
Okay, and then next is leadership has generally been in person, but when there are multiple locations that parts and service managers are directing, how does that leadership change from being the manager back in the office and the frontline employees can talk with? Also, what changes are happening in customer service when the customers are ordering online?
Okay, so first of all, on leadership and the transition within the dealership, one thing that was evident in the survey as well is there are some people in the dealership that do not want to be promoted. They do not want to be managing their fellow employees. They are comfortable with their lifestyle, they're comfortable with their hours, their pay, and the lifestyle that they get out of that. And they don't want to be working weekends, or they don't want to be managing people. And that's perhaps a surprise to us. And so now, how do we take someone who's maybe reluctant and we promote them? Well, obviously they're not going to have the leadership skills there to do it, and that might not be a good long-term solution as well. And I firmly believe as leadership involves attitude, and leadership is probably very difficult to teach. And I think we've made some great strides in this area with Dr. Larry Cole in teaching leadership. And what we found is some people are just in the wrong positions. Some people are just put into positions where it's detrimental to the whole dealership. And the term that we use is they're terrorists. And perhaps the most successful dealerships have been the ones that have been able to get the terrorists out of those key positions and get leaders in there. But leadership requires attitude. It involves behavior. It involves the ability to inspire employees. It involves setting a good example for the rest of employees. It's a combination of things, and some people are born with it. Some people are natural leaders, and it's something that can be instilled in somebody over time with what I would call a personal improvement plan. So some staff have some hidden talents that are maybe not at the surface, but putting together a personal improvement plan can get them to be good leaders within their organization. And Kim, maybe if you could just repeat the second part of that question for me.
Sure, let me pull it back up. It had to do with customer service when things are being purchased online.
Yeah. So, man, that's the world that we're moving into. The Amazon-based world, and I think the customer expectation from purchasing stuff online is different than our little maybe outside of our industry, because we've got a very strong personal relationship, certainly on the ag and construction side, less so on the outdoor power equipment side. But I think the expectation from an online purchase is it's the right thing that I ordered that shows up on time, and if there's something wrong, there's a very easy and simple return process. But certainly on an online purchase is not as customer friendly or brings into that personal relationship like a face-to-face visit or even a phone call to the known staff within the dealership. Our customers, they rely on our staff to support their operations. We want to be viewed as solution providers to our customers. Whereas when we get into the online world, and in my opinion, it's just like another commodity, and buying something online from a dealership is perhaps no different than buying something unrelated that's on Amazon. Now, having said all of that, I think the customers are seeing the convenience that comes with online, and maybe the solution down the road is some sort of a hybrid. But we are in the sales and service business, and service is something that perhaps we can do remote diagnostics. Still, there is an in-person component, especially on the repair equipment in a lot of cases. That is, I think, still going to be a key part of our industry for decades.
Did you break any of the data out by size of the dealership? So number of locations?
So we have not, but we have that ability to do that. And if someone's interested in doing that, Kim, just have them reach out to me, and our contact information is still on the screen, and we'll be able to break that data out for them.
Okay. So you'll be able to do by mainline, by size.
That's correct.
All right. We have time for one or two more questions. If anyone has anything they wanted to ask yet. All right, it looks like that does it for questions. Like I mentioned at the beginning, we are recording the webinar so that you'll have a chance to go back and review it, and that'll be available on the Farm Equipment website in the next day or two. And then also just keep an eye on your email and the Farm Equipment newsletter for more information on when that's available. So then on behalf of Michael, John, WEDA, and the Dealer Institute teams and Farm Equipment staff, thanks for joining us for the webinar. When you leave, there'll be a short survey. Please let us know what you thought of the webinar and if there's any topics you'd like us to cover in the future. Thanks, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.